In the spring of 2022, Cheam First Nation leadership and community members came together in a focused workshop to support your community's economic participation in potential energy developments in your community lands and beyond. The Navigators Project, led by the National Consortium for Indigenous Economic Development, known as NCIED, and the University of Victoria Gustafson School of Business. The workshops were facilitated in person and online by Viable Opportunities for Indigenous Created Economies, known as VOICE, as a part of the broader Navigators program, which seeks to liaise Indigenous regional experts with Indigenous employment and training coordinators, provincial and federal government representatives, industry, union, and training providers. The intent of the workshop was to support Cheam to define your economic strategies and needs and choose approaches tailored to your unique situations and self-defined goals through a graphic facilitation process guided by experienced Indigenous facilitators. The overall purpose was to support business development and capacity development in your community. To begin the strategic planning workshop, we sought to understand Cheam's objectives along with a preferred approach to undertake for the workshop. You will find a summary of these planning objectives in Section 1 titled Planning Objectives. Section 2, Good News Stories, Envisioning Future Success, is a result of taking time in the process to envision what good news stories Cheam would like to see in the future. This exercise was another way of seeking pathways to economic prosperity. In Section 3, Economic Pressures, Current Economic Reality, we present a summary of the pressures Cheam faces with respect to economic development and prosperity. In Section 4, in Economic Opportunities, we created a map of opportunities available for economic development across diverse areas and identified capacity gaps, training, infrastructure, financial, required to access these opportunities. We began our workshop by discussing the purpose of economic development and all aspects of why we are here. This was the guiding principle of this session. Our goal was to examine the energy-related economic opportunities for Cheam and set the stage for the future. During this specific aspect of the planning session, we brainstormed the outcomes we wanted to see as a result of our plan and described the future work that will get us there. Cheam workshop participants were asked the following 3 questions. Can you tell us a bit about yourself? Why do we need to better understand energy opportunities in our community? What is the ideal outcome of the day? This discussion is clearly represented by the visual graphic, where examples of both areas of concern with economic development as well as hopes for the future are identified. We acknowledge that growth here has been limited for the last years with the pandemic. We have land and resources, but we need structure and ways to raise issues and have them fixed. We noted that diversity equals stability, and there are opportunities for focusing on clean economic development, tapping into the economy in Canada. Our culture is identified as a way to grow, growing our culture and spreading our knowledge while we grow with our neighbors. We identified specific opportunities, including creating an industrial site and having a lodge on our land, and in-house training to give people hope and a vision for their own future. We also noted some barriers and gaps, including missed opportunities with no registry of labor, agreements that had been shuffled away with changing priorities, and misunderstanding and misinformation. Other concerns included lack of access to the economy, lack of innovation in agriculture, corn is our go-to, and that our environment must be protected in any economic development. We must respect Tlilake, Mount Cheam, or Mother Mountain. Key themes uncovered in this session included: we need clear direction from the community on economic direction. The health of our people is most important. We seek employment for everyone willing to work. Talmayok, our responsibility to 7 generations forward and 7 generations back. The previous section of this video looked at the desired outcomes and goals of the workshop. In this section, we open up to the future in order to project a vision for economic prosperity. The goal of this exercise was to answer the following: what would some of the good news stories look like in the future? What are the headlines we would like to see in local, national, and international papers? Participants were encouraged to think of both energy-related success stories as well as broader stories of success. Cheam First Nation headlines were divided into 3 distinct themes: economic opportunities, culture, community well-being, and infrastructure. The range of headlines speaks to the broad vision of economic prosperity as beyond simply job creation. The first series of headlines we would like to see include Cheam First Nation sees new economic development, including sustainable jobs through training. Industrial Park creates revenue, and a business registry for skilled and unskilled labor is developed. Other headlines included a rise in ecotourism, and the gondola project is funded by community dividend. There is sustainable land development, and a Cheam is opening a tourism lodge and a hemp farm. There is also relationship building for economic development, and these articles show the interest in economic development as a component of economic prosperity. The second series of headlines focus on culture as a pathway to economic prosperity. This includes headlines such as 80% of Cheam members speaking Helk Amelum, and Cheam builds a longhouse, fishing lodge, and Indigenous Culture Center to grow and share culture. Additional headlines include Cheam creates cultural teen programs and incorporate culture with schooling and creates a youth council in 2023 to guide opportunities. These articles would reference the importance of culture in future economic development and well-being of Cheam First Nation and its membership, resulting in new economic opportunities for entrepreneurs and the nation. The final series of headlines center around community well-being and infrastructure. From headlines such as Drug-Free Reserve, Cheam opens healing and treatment center with a 0% addiction rate, and that Cheam can provide a safe injection site for harm reduction. Headlines such as Cheam community has achieved zero homeless by 2024. Tiny homes and space for economic housing speak to the importance of housing as a key component of both well-being and economic opportunities. Other headlines included, we see the development of a band office with playground, and that there are renovations coming with landscaping and cleaning up older homes, which speak to the need for more and improving infrastructure to support the priorities of Cheam members. Food security was a key headline, as participants spoke about the importance of maintaining supply chains and food sovereignty in unsettled times. Additional headlines include Chief and Council set strong guidelines for economic development, helping to provide certainty and clarity to members and partners, paired with strong support from Chief and Council. We have full employment at Cheam with the highest level per capita of First Nations for entrepreneurship, and we see successful businesses within Cheam with a registry for skilled and unskilled labor, showcasing the economic strength of the community. These headlines make it clear that economic prosperity must be in balance with other community measurements of well-being. The Hwch Cheam have lived in Soch Tamoch for thousands of years. After envisioning the future of the Cheam First Nation and broader regional economy, we moved to a discussion of the now, present time, and examined the current pressures, contexts, and forces that need to be considered for economic prosperity. In this stage of the workshop, we considered legal, political, governance, cultural, economic factors, and the broader environmental climate, as well as other overarching pressures that impact the Cheam economic reality. The legal portion of economic pressures focuses on diverse legal and legislative issues potentially hindering economic growth. This includes the ongoing impact of the Indian Act, which was designed for us to fail. United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and BC's Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act will impact us in ways that we do not fully understand. We are pressured by both provincial law and federal law, which affects us on reserve, including the Department of Fisheries. Funding agreements impact us, with government funding keeping us waiting and funding of projects by Indian Services Canada being tenuous and tied to their priorities rather than ours. Managing Cheam First Nation landhold lands is complex, and keeping legal clarity will continue to be a challenge. Looking at the political and government factors that surround economic development, it was identified within Cheam the 2-year election cycle creates multiple impacts on our economic development with changing priorities. These and other governance factors, paired with low administrative capacity, can result in no accountability and lack of transparency in communication. Our land code impacts development and can create hindrances. It was identified that we must hear and stand with people, good and bad. There are cultural pressures which impact economic development, including systemic oppression, which impacts all aspects of our lives. This is reflected in funding disparities that we see. We acknowledge that we have seen the pushing of religious culture over our traditional culture, which will continue to impact us. We have varying perspectives on sustainability from other governments and government organizations, including DFO. This includes the pressure to replant medicinal plants in areas of development. We asked, what do we want to see? And it was clear that we must ask the community. Additionally, our inherent rights has been eroded over time, and we must constantly fight to protect this and to protect culturally significant locations. The Cheam First Nation economy does not operate in a vacuum. The broader local, provincial, national, and world economies impact the Cheam economy. The changing economic realities of a post-COVID-19 world, concerns about inflation, and ongoing economic challenges on a global level are certainly of concern to Cheam members. In response to economic challenges, it was identified that not enough revenue was an ongoing problem for the nation. With increasing inflation in early 2022, this means that funding and grants simply will not stretch as far to meet Cheam member needs. Budgeting and reporting is a key pressure, with lack of capacity making these difficult and time-consuming processes. Access to capital continues to be an issue, with the lack of revenue paired with lack of assets recognized by banks limiting options. Poor infrastructure is a challenge, with roads in need of repair and the lack of wastewater plant felt acutely by the community. Finally, there are broader environmental pressures. This is broader pressures external at a local, provincial, federal, or global level that may impact energy-related economic development. The pandemic restrictions have impacted us for the last 2 years and continue to impact the ways in which we work. As shown by flooding and other climate events, environmental disasters are real, and preparing for them and mitigating their effects will be of key concern to the nation. We have seen supply chain blockages caused by wars and expect to continue to see these in the future. The poor salmon returns highlights that there is a problem, which impacts our traditional ways of life and culture, and that is a problem we cannot fix by ourselves. To manage the pressures outlined in this section of the report, our community needs the help of our members. As a community, we need to continue to use our values as the compass to guide the delicate balance between governance, culture, and economics. A key insight was developed through our discussions. Economic prosperity is all about balance. We need to consider the impact on future generations. We came together to map opportunities for economic growth and development, the fuel that drives us to economic prosperity. We framed potential opportunities in broad categories, beginning with LNG, oil and gas, green energy, and an other category to facilitate discussion, which resulted in a vibrant discussion. Recognizing that within each of these categories there are opportunities that were more aligned with economic opportunities on Cheam lands, and some opportunities that were either adjacent to or off Cheam lands, such as those opportunities sought at a regional, provincial, or national level. These opportunities, both achieved and unrealized, were placed on a spectrum with on community lands on the left to adjacent to community lands on the right. Mapping Cheam opportunities for economic development reaffirmed our knowledge that there are unrealized opportunities for both Cheam entrepreneurs and Cheam First Nation to pursue to the betterment of the nation and Cheam members. Participants identified a number of energy opportunities, including solar panels on homes, solar powers on the landfill, and windmills in our very windy areas. Opportunities for strategic economic opportunities were explored, including a First Nation store, with ways to share our food and art. Ways to provide services to our members, such as a daycare, were considered. We identified that we have a lot of land and could grow our own vegetables beyond corn, including in greenhouses for food security. Cattle are a potential option, though chickens were noted as being too regulated to pursue. Additional opportunities included a cultural learning house and other ways to boost morale and well-being in the community. Ecotourism was a key theme, including a fleet of boats, a fishing lodge, and other tourism businesses. We identified that we have a lot of land and that finding economically and environmentally sustainable ways to live off the land is a key priority. Off community lands, many additional economic opportunities were identified. We saw a need to build on our connection to the land with environmental monitoring services, and that there may be ways to develop a recycling facility or to look into industries that invest in hemp. Economic opportunities are available to Cheam First Nation, which require increased capacity or capacity development in order to access. Economic strategic planning is an ongoing process. This Navigators Workshop and report to the Cheam First Nation and its membership represents a small step in a long journey towards prosperity and well-being, which we hope will continue in 2022 with government funding. It is with Cheam values that we will be able to build our capacity and work to develop economic prosperity. This video outlines a snapshot in time, envisioning future success for Cheam and identifying pressures on economic success. It also examines a series of economic opportunities, the gaps in capacity required to access these opportunities, and provides examples of capacity gap closing programs that may be applicable to Cheam.